thought the dot on my ceiling was just a bug. What I found instead made me question every second I'd spent alone in my home. After my divorce, I was finally starting to rebuild. I had moved into a small house, paid for with my modest teacher's salary, and was slowly learning how to exist without the constant weight of my ex's shadow. My kitchen, however, was a disaster. The cabinets were rotting, the stove barely worked, and the entire space felt like a constant reminder of the life I'd left behind. That's when my older brother, Drew, stepped in like some kind of hero. He ran a successful construction company with a 6-month waitlist, but when I mentioned my kitchen troubles, he waved it off. "You've been through enough," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Let me take care of it. I'll do it at cost." Instead of the usual $15,000, he quoted me $8,000. I was hesitant at first. Mixing family with business rarely ends well, but he insisted. "Family comes first," he said. And for the first time since the divorce, I felt supported, like I wasn't doing all of this alone. His crew was professional, polite, and cleaned up after themselves daily. Drew would stop by in the evenings to check the progress, bring dinner, and catch up. It almost felt like I had a real support system again. And when the renovation was done, the kitchen looked like something out of a magazine. Granite countertops, custom cabinets, brand new appliances. He even surprised me with a built-in wine fridge. "You deserve something nice," he said during the final walkthrough. "Mom would have wanted you taken care of." I cried that night, not because of the kitchen, but because I truly believed my brother was looking out for me. 2 months later, everything changed. One morning, while getting dressed for work, I noticed a tiny black dot in my bedroom ceiling that hadn't been there before. At first, I assumed it was dust or a bug, but something about it looked too perfect. I grabbed a chair and climbed up to get a better look. My heart stopped. It was a camera, a hidden camera, discreet, professionally installed, and aimed directly at my bed. And that was just the beginning. Because what I found next made me physically sick. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to keep going. I called in sick, locked every door and window, and started checking every room, every corner, every vent, every screw that looked too new. I moved furniture. I pulled apart light fixtures. And with every new discovery, the bile in my stomach rose higher. There were cameras in my bedroom, my bathroom, the living room, and even one inside the kitchen island, aimed perfectly at the breakfast bar where I sat every morning in my robe with coffee. Each one was carefully hidden, impossible to spot unless you knew what you were looking for. That kitchen, the one my brother had renovated with so much love, had been designed not just for beauty, but for surveillance. I couldn't breathe. The idea that someone, anyone, had been watching me undress, shower, sleep, eat, for 2 months made my skin crawl. But when I remembered that the someone was likely Drew, my own brother, I felt my legs give out. I wanted to scream, to confront him, to destroy everything. But instead, I forced myself to stay calm. I needed proof. That afternoon, I drove to the nearest electronics store and bought a signal tracer, something that could detect where these cameras were streaming. I followed the feed back to a single local IP address. I traced that IP address. It led to Drew's house. I sat in my car outside his place for nearly an hour, staring at the signal logs, refreshing them, hoping it was some mistake. That maybe someone had hacked the system. But there was no mistake. My own brother had turned my house into his private reality show. The rage I felt in that moment was nuclear. But I didn't go to the police. Not yet, because I knew. If I was going to burn his life down, I was going to do it right. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at my kitchen table, that damn kitchen island, staring at the spot where a camera, Lenz had silently watched me for weeks. Every cup of coffee, every private call, every tear after my divorce. Recorded. At sunrise, I drove to the only place I knew Drew would be. The coffee shop where he met his crew every morning before their jobs. I waited in the parking lot, watching his van pull up like it was just another ordinary day. When he rolled down the window and saw me, his entire face drained of color. "We need to talk," I said flatly. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out, just a weak nod. I motioned to my car. "Get in." We drove in silence. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, but I didn't let the fury rise. Not yet. I needed him to show me, to confirm what I already knew. At his house, I told him, "Take me to the garage." Drew hesitated. "Why?" "You know why." He walked ahead of me, moving slowly, like a man walking toward his own execution. When the garage door lifted, the smell of paint and sawdust hit me. But that's not what made my stomach drop. Against the far wall were 3 large monitors, all of them live streaming footage from my house. My bedroom, my bathroom, my living room, the kitchen. Each screen showed different angles of my life in real time. Next to them, a laptop sat open. There were folders labeled by room, by date, by time. Hundreds of video files. And then I saw the names: bedroom shower, compilation, morning routine, highlight reel. I couldn't hold back anymore. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking. Drew ran a hand over his face. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Don't lie. Not now." "I was just worried about you," he mumbled. "You were living alone. After the divorce. I wanted to make sure you were safe." I turned to him, eyes burning. "Safe? You put cameras in my shower and labeled the files compilation. You edited highlight reels of your own sister." Drew's face collapsed into shame, or maybe just fear. "I know how it looks." "No, you don't," I interrupted, "because if you did, you'd be in handcuffs already." He tried to move toward me, but I backed away. "Don't. Come. Near me." In that moment, I realized this wasn't just perversion or control. This was betrayal on a level I couldn't have imagined. The man who'd once helped me ride a bike, who'd danced with me at prom, who'd made promises at our mother's funeral to always look after me, had violated me in ways I still can't fully process. But I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to break down in front of him. I was going to end him. I left Drew's house with shaking hands, but a burning clarity in my chest. This wasn't something I could handle privately anymore. This wasn't just a disgusting invasion of privacy. It was a crime. Multiple crimes. But before I went to the police, I went strategic. First, I made copies of everything. The video files, the streaming logs, even voice recordings I'd secretly captured during our confrontation. Then, I compiled a folder labeled simply Client Evidence Package. You see, Drew's construction company had contracts with several high-end developers and real estate agencies in our area. I still had contacts from my nonprofit work in the community, people who took privacy very seriously. That morning, I made 3 phone calls. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just calmly stated, "I believe you should know what kind of surveillance systems your contractor has experience installing." Without consent. By noon, Drew had lost over $200,000 in contracts. One agency dropped him publicly with a statement. "We do not work with businesses that compromise client privacy, especially not those under active criminal investigation." Next up, his wife. I texted her, "Linda, we need to meet. Bring your laptop and be somewhere private." When we sat down in her home office, I pulled out my drive and said only, "You're going to see things that will make you sick, but you need to know." She watched the videos in silence. At one point, she gasped, There are videos of me. This is our guest bathroom." Her face went pale. She covered her mouth. "He watched me too?" she whispered. I nodded. She stood up, walked to her bookshelf, grabbed a folder labeled Financials, and said, "I'm filing for divorce today, and he's not walking away with anything." By that evening, she'd frozen their joint accounts, changed all the locks, and sent Drew a single message. "Your filth has cost you your family." As the sun set, I finally made one last call, to the police. I handed the officers a labeled USB drive, complete with a timeline, a witness list, and video samples. They didn't even need to ask questions. They just stared at the evidence, then asked for Drew's address. He was arrested that same night. As they placed him in handcuffs, Drew looked up at the house he'd once helped renovate and said through clenched teeth, "You've destroyed my life." From my Ring doorbell, I answered loud and clear, "No, Drew. You destroyed your life the day you decided to spy on your own sister." The courtroom smelled like varnished wood and stale coffee, but for me, it may as well have been fire and brimstone. The air was heavy with the kind of silence people wear when they're watching someone else's life fall apart, and secretly wondering if they'll ever survive the same. Drew sat there in a navy blue suit he probably hadn't worn since our mother's funeral. He looked smaller than I remembered, paler, no ring on his finger. Linda wasn't there, just his lawyer, a thin man who looked like he charged by the breath. I couldn't look at Drew, not when the prosecutor played the first clip. It was a muted video of me eating cereal in my pajamas. Nothing provocative, just intimate, private. I remembered that morning. I had been crying over a stupid text from my ex-husband, and there I was, on screen, wiping my eyes with my sleeve like a little girl. The jury looked uncomfortable. One woman put her hand to her mouth. The footage wasn't graphic. It didn't have to be. It was violence of a different kind, the kind that makes you feel violated without ever being touched. The prosecutor laid it all out like a horror movie in court format. Cameras in my home, all strategically installed during the renovation. Dozens of video files categorized by room and time of day audio of Drew directing his crew on how to disguise wiring inside the walls and ceilings. Text messages retrieved from his backup drive, where he referred to me as his little reality show, and then came Linda. She was calm, controlled. She took the stand with quiet fury in her eyes and said, "I found recordings of myself changing in our guest bathroom. I thought I was staying with family. I thought I was safe." The jury was frozen, and yet the defense still tried to spin it. "My client was worried for his sister," the lawyer said. "She lived alone. She was recovering from a difficult divorce. He made a mistake out of concern." Concern? That's what they called it when a man installs a hidden camera in your shower, when he compiles your morning routine into a highlight reel. I took the stand. My knees were shaking, but my voice wasn't. I told them about the betrayal, about the dozens of dinners we shared while he knew I was being watched, about the days I danced in my kitchen barefoot and felt happy for the first time in months, not knowing I was being filmed. I looked straight at the jury and said, "I would have rather had my house fall down around me than live inside a home built by someone who saw me as entertainment." The jury didn't need long. They came back with a verdict, guilty on all counts. Drew was sentenced to 2 years in state prison, with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and registry as a sex offender. His company folded within weeks. His crew left town. His name, once trusted, became a cautionary tale. And Linda? She didn't just file for divorce. She sued for emotional damages. She won. She texted me a week later. "I hope you know you saved more than just yourself." She was right, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. After the sentencing, I went home, locked my door, and sat in my silent kitchen, the one Drew built. I stared at the granite countertops, at the island, at the space where the camera used to be. Then I picked up a hammer. I smashed every tile he laid, every inch he touched. I didn't stop until I saw dust and wood and raw, honest space again. And in that rubble, I found something more powerful than justice. I found peace. People love to talk about healing, like it's some neat little checklist. Burn the evidence, block the number, buy a new plant, light a candle, move on. But healing after your own brother violates your trust so completely, after your sanctuary becomes a stage for someone else's sick fantasy, healing doesn't come with a checklist. It comes in waves, and some of them knock you flat on your face. The first week after the trial, I didn't speak to anyone. Not my friends, not my therapist, not even Linda. I stayed in my house, camera-free now, every wall stripped to the studs, and just existed. Sometimes I sat on the floor with a bottle of wine and cried. Sometimes I rearranged furniture obsessively, like changing my space could undo what happened. Sometimes I laughed at random things just to prove I still could. But I kept waking up at 3:17 a.m., same time every night. That was when I'd usually catch Drew's van pulling into my driveway during the renovation. He always said it was to double-check measurements. Now I knew better. The paranoia didn't go away easily. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow felt like surveillance. I bought 2 dogs, installed alarms, triple-locked my doors. But the hardest part? Forgiving myself. I kept asking, how did I not see it? How did I invite him in, make him dinner, hug him goodbye, while he was spying on me? The answer was simple and brutal. Because I loved him. Because he was my brother. And that's what betrayal really is. It's not about what the person did. It's about who they were supposed to be when they did it. Eventually, I went back to work. My students welcomed me like nothing had happened. They didn't know their English teacher had just testified in a voyeurism trial. All they knew was I looked tired and smiled less. But something shifted in me. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that supports women dealing with digital abuse and privacy violations. I spoke at a conference anonymously. I sat in rooms with survivors of revenge porn, stalkerware, hidden cameras, and told my story. Because if I didn't, what was the point of surviving it? I learned to set boundaries sharper than knives, to listen to my instincts when something felt off, to redefine family not by blood, but by behavior. And then came the bathroom, the one space I avoided renovating after the kitchen incident. One afternoon, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. Tiles, paint, a new mirror. Every hammer strike felt like reclaiming something. Every brush of grout felt like taking back what he tried to steal. When I finally took a shower in my finished bathroom, just me, no fear, no eyes watching, I cried. Not from sadness, but from freedom. Losing my brother felt like losing a part of myself. Not the brother I once trusted, but the man he had become. The man who shattered every ounce of trust I had in him. That kind of betrayal isn't just painful. It cuts deep, like a wound that never fully heals. For days I felt numb, like I was stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I kept replaying every moment, every conversation, wondering how I missed the signs. How could someone so close, so familiar, do something so cruel? But in that dark place, I found something I didn't expect. Strength. Strength to face the truth no matter how ugly it was. Strength to protect myself and those I love from further harm. Strength to rebuild a life that felt completely broken. I realized that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, trust, and kindness. Those are the foundations I would now choose to build on. And while some relationships ended that day, others began to grow. People who saw my worth beyond the betrayal. I started taking back control of my life, little by little. I repaired my home with my own hands. Every brush stroke and tile placed was a symbol of my new beginning. No more hiding, no more secrets, just honesty, safety, and peace. The scars from my brother's actions will always be there, but they no longer control me. They remind me how far I've come, how I turned pain into power. I'm no longer a victim of his choices. I'm a survivor, a fighter, and someone who refuses to let darkness define her story. This isn't just a story about hidden cameras or betrayal. It's a story about finding your voice when everyone else tries to silence it. It's about choosing yourself when those closest to you don't. And it's about the incredible strength that comes from rising, even when everything tries to knock you down. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you can do is reclaim your life and live it on your own terms.